In today's show, sometimes it could be hard to find information on the old famous CLT, but we're here to dive into it, the Charlotte Hornets, and talk about their upcoming fantasy basketball season. Michael Bolton, do you know anything about CLT?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. All right. Charlotte Hornets time. A team that is not as bad, I don't think, as what their record showed last season. A team that has one of the more confusing front court wing rotations in the NBA, and I don't know when we're going to get clarity on it. A team that I think gets undervalued, but also that can lead to some fantasy opportunities for us. So, morning.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right, another quick reminder, Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl is open, and we're taking applications. You can apply on every single show. The most you will get is one cat invite and 1 points invite. We've got divisions for both. The details are up there on the screen. There's an entry form specific to each show that you will find in the description below and in the show notes on the audio side, and there will be a question that is specific on this show. There's a few other questions on there. You don't have to get a perfect score. I'm just using something to differentiate the hundreds of replies we'll get to each one of them. Nail them, and you get a better chance of getting in. It's not the only determining factor, though. But if you miss the question that I asked during this show, then you're probably not going to get in. That's the one you probably need to get right. But we're here to talk Hornets. We're not going to dwell on the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, even though it's dwellable. I think it's going to be really fun this season. I'm looking forward to it. I can't even remember which division I'm in. I have to look into that. But yeah, that's what we're doing. Those drafts will start beginning of October. Also, if you did qualify for the FBI X LOFB Fantasy Basketball World Cup, B-Dub from Fantasy Basketball International is doing the invites at the moment, so they should come out to you soon. The official Fantrax invites for the World Cup will come out soon. So if you did get one of those, they should come soon. Don't worry. Let's talk Charlotte Hornets. Their schedule. Given that they were a bad team, it makes sense to see their quality game number so low. 40. That is quite clearly, obviously not very good. The max number of quality games in the NBA is 55. That's a big, big difference. They are almost the worst team. The worst is the Rockets. It doesn't quite make sense that the Clippers also have only 40 quality games, as they got dicked hard on the schedule. But that means that your Hornets guys, especially if they're fringy sort of players, they're playing a lot of games, over half of their games, on high volume days. So if you're looking at Gordon Hayward, if you're looking at maybe even PJ Washington Jr., over half of the games that they play will be on those Wednesdays and Fridays, high volume days. Meaning, a couple of things. Meaning, you won't start them as often, but the negative impact of an injury is reduced because there'll be days where you wouldn't use them anyway. Interesting. They have the most back-to-backs in the NBA at 15. Again, terrible schedule. We'll talk more about it in schedule in a sec. In terms of max weeks, I think you get the idea of what a max week is. It's the amount of weeks that you play the most games out of anybody in the NBA. So usually it's a 4-game week. They have 13 out of the 24 weeks. That's on the low side. And they also have a 2-game week in the playoffs. So if we want to hit schedule, that smells a lot. That's all really bad. If your playoffs end 24th of March, they go 3-4-2 in finals week. Yuck. If you go 31st of March, they go 4-2-4. That 2 in the middle is yuck. If you finish 7th of April, which I believe should be once they fix it up, Yahoo default, that's 244, 2 games in the first week. And then if you go the final week, they max out at 444, so have the most games in that week. But relatively rough schedule, bad max weeks, high back-to-backs, and low-quality games means that as a general rule, the schedule is bad. There are a lot of negatives, and that should have a small impact on the way that you look at the Hornets. It just might mean if you're looking to debate between them and another guy, maybe you knock them off just because there's just so many negative factors there on their overall schedule. What are the pressure points for this team? Steve Clifford's ethos is what I put up there. What does he want to do? In the past, Steve Clifford has been a real slow it down player. Coach, that didn't really happen last season. That's interesting. But he focuses a lot on defense. So if someone struggles defensively, especially in the forward positions, I'm looking at you, Brandon Miller. How do they play? Also, Steve Clifford hates rookies. Hates them. If Brandon Miller plays 32 minutes a night, I don't know what I'll do. I'll wear a hat that says I love CLT. I'll wear that anyway. If he plays more than... there is almost no chance. Not only do they have a million forwards, but Clifford hates rookies. And Miller's not that good. That impacts a lot. But what if the old bastard changes his mind? I don't know what's going to happen. What if he says, nah, we'll go LaMelo, let's freewheel, defense isn't as important. Let's develop, let's get the young guys out there, bench the old guys. It seems unreal. But what if he changes? Or what if Gabe Plotchkin, believe that's his name, the new owner, what if he comes down to Steve and says, Steve, while I'm not going to be rubbing oil on your bald head here and really pumping you up, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to tell you, just stop with the bullshit. Get the young guys out. Let's play fun basketball. I don't give a shit what you're doing. Fundamentals. What if Gabe does that? What if Gabe wants new age basketball? What if Gabe wants, well, Michael Jordan made me pick Brandon Miller. Can I actually see him on the court? What if the new owner says, screw it, we're the new owners. We're not Matt Ishbia, but let's do something crazy. Let's trade a lot of guys and bring someone else in. Who knows what they're going to do? Or is Michael Jordan behind the scenes just telling them what to do despite not being a majority owner? And what are they focusing on? Are they looking at the future? Where does that come from? Kupchak? Doubt it. Jordan? Well, who knows? His evaluation is horrible at all times. Clifford? Plotchkin? Or are they just like, no, let's be better. We were a playing team 2 years ago. We can get back to being that. And that would mean minutes for those older guys or established guys. But any sort of pivot there changes tons about how this team looks. And we just don't know exactly the direction they're going to look. This might seem a little strange to you, but in breakout candidates, I don't really know who there is. I look at all the projections that I do for people, and again, when I'm talking breakouts, I look at projections, and then I go, when I look at this, how can this guy, what's the path for this guy completely blowing these numbers out of the water? And I don't see it for anybody. I'm relatively strong on LaMelo Ball. I don't really see him getting significantly better than that. I don't see it for Mark Williams. I don't see it for Gordon Hayward. I don't see it for Brandon Miller or Miles Bridges or PJ Washington or Terry Rozier or James Bouknight or any of these blokes. I think what I've projected them out, it's hard for me to go, yeah, I can see 20% better than this. Now, if you want to say breakout is, hey, they were much better than last season, then Williams is that guy. The breakout of Miles Bridges 2 years ago. Is him getting back to that? Is that a breakout after not playing? Not really. Does Melo average 30 points a game? I don't think so. Can Melo be a 28-point per game guy on a true shooting of 60? Well, that would be a breakout. But I don't really see it happening. So I'm just listing them as no breakouts under that strict definition of what I'm talking about. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season, it has snapped into action. Puns are fantastic. And you snap into that action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. All you have to do is place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. Just in time to bet on the Miami Dolphins. Throw $1 on, throw $5 on, get the $200 bonus bets. The Miami Dolphins to win not only week 2, but to win the Super Bowl and restore Don Shula's legacy. And restore the memory of Scott Mitchell. I don't think he's dead, but just the memory of him in general. Points, spreads, money lines, over-unders, player props, futures. It's all there over on FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season just like Pete Stoyanovich. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. And that means it's time for us to go under the lens, slide him right under there. Mark Williams.
Oh, hi, Mark.
All right, let's talk about Mark Williams, a guy that was picked just outside the lottery last season. I hated what they did in the draft last season, trading away pick number 13 where they could have picked Jalen Duren, who I think is still a significantly better prospect than Mark Williams, to get back the pick that turned into Nick Smith this season and some future seconds, which they traded and combined. And anyway, shit draft management. They could have had 13 and 15 last season, and they didn't. Cool, idiots. But anyway, they've got Mark Williams now. His value, as you can see on that graph, he's played a couple of games early on in the season. That's the -1 weekly ranks, -1 totals, weekly ranks. He played a couple of games early, and Steve Clear go, hey, hang on a second, you're a rookie. What are you doing on the court? Get out of here, go to Greensboro, swarm around over there, and then I'll see you later on. And that's what happened. When the team was going nowhere, LaMelo Ball was out, and you were running 33 minutes of the cockroach Mason Plumlee. Again, insane coaching. But here we are. Then Williams came back. He took over the backup role ahead of Big Dick Nick Richards. And then you can see those -1 ranks there. Look, they weren't that good. And then Plumlee got traded. And Williams became the starter. And you see there are many weeks there of him being a top 100 player, top 150 player. You see there's a couple of weeks there he was a top 30 guy in one of those weeks. And then he hurt his thumb. And he suffered a thumb ligament issue. It caused him to miss a little bit of time. And then shenanigans caused them to go with a 3-man starting center rotation. 1 game Williams, 1 game Richards, 1 game Kai Jones. Streaming legend, Kai Jones. And not fantasy basketball streaming. I'm talking online social media. Probably shouldn't have the camera on when you sweat like that, Kai. Don't know, maybe just me. They have made some, let's say, questionable player personnel decisions in terms of perhaps the character of some of their players. So, I look forward to Kevin Porter Jr. suiting up for this team soon. But Williams, those numbers are all over the place. That is a very steep line going down, saying, yeah, it did nothing early, but really started to crank later on. And I think some people will look at some of the end of the season stuff with him and say, well, they're just going to play center by committee. I honestly don't believe that for a second. I think what happened, A, he had a busted up thumb, and B, they were just trying to lose as many games as possible, and they were in full evaluation mode. That's why the centers were chucking through. Clifford is not that guy. As a general rule, he's just going, hey, we'll do this one game. He's a stubborn ass. That's what he does. He just will keep a bloke in there and play him every game. So I'm not worried necessarily about that sort of situation. And we can see with Williams' minutes, as the season went on, they went right up. Look at those minutes early on, 5 minutes and 7 minutes in the first 2 weeks. Really got out there. And then we had 1 week where he played 106 minutes. And then the thumb injury hurt and reduced his playing time. His field goal percentage is one of his strengths. He's probably not ever going to be a stretch big man. I haven't even talked about this where he ranked last season. 170th in Yahoo points, 167th in ESPN points, and 142nd in 9-cat leagues using a -1 format. He averaged last season, Williams, when you look at his numbers, he played 19 minutes a game, 9 and 7 with a block, 64 from the field, and 69 from the line.
Giggity.
He doesn't really get assists, half an assist, 0.7 steals, but also remember, that's 19 minutes. So let's say we go to 30, then that's like a steal a game. That's pretty good. That's almost an assist. It's not great, but it's like 8 or 9 rebounds. It's 11, 12 points. The free throws are an issue, but the field goals are nice. And we see that field goal being relatively strong most weeks over 60. And while there's a lot of variance here, 73, 74, 67, 68, nearly every week, he's over 60%. Volume will vary, but let's not count those first 2 weeks, but once he started being a regular rotation player, only 3 weeks was he under 60% for the week. That's pretty good. Again, a lot of fluctuations, but he was pretty reliable in producing positive value. And the blocks, again, we don't see anything early on, but once he started getting cracking here, 5 blocks, 4 blocks, 6 blocks, 5 blocks, 8 blocks, 3 blocks, and then the thumb injury, and he just didn't do much at the end of the season. We really do want to focus on this middle zone of the season when he was starting and playing good minutes, blocking shots, good field goals, good minutes, good fantasy rank, because there were factors on either side of that. His Darko change log early on with some real positive growth curve stuff. A little worried that halfway through the season, well, it's not no worry, but there is there's something to watch, that the Darko change slope became negative towards the end of the season. So he was trending up, and his Darko still is negative. Darko, remember, is a daily plus minus thing that gives you a forward view and a back view of what they've done plus what they could do based on numerous factors and box score numbers and on-off and all these other metrics. Still considered a negative player, but towards the end, he had that nice little peak and then started to drop. Now, I think, again, that's thumb injury related, as we've tied in with all those other graphs. So while, again, if we take just one thing and look at it in isolation, we can get really whatever sort of conclusion we want out of it. Oh, Williams started and then they figured him out and he started playing poorly. You could get that from that graph. Once he got in there, he blew up, and then teams said, no, we know how to deal with this, and he got worse. And he's on a downward trajectory, and he's never going to be a full-term guy. You could do that. You could look at those minutes per game and say, well, Clifford's just going to run roulette at center. You go, Jesus, that's going to annoy us, isn't it? Or you can make all of those things, but putting everything in context with the stuff that you know or you don't know, and I'm telling you about the injury and the tanking and the Cliffordness of it all, it paints a better picture. And while I wouldn't say that he's going to be a continual positive riser in terms of DPM and just blowing through the roof, he's a second-year guy who showed a lot, and then a thumb injury hit and started to take some of that out. That's my major takeaway. I really like this next scatter plot thanks to the guys at Basketball Index. Again, there's so many bits of info we can use, but a couple of things here. The x-axis is roll man possessions per 75 possessions in the percentile. So how many times will you use as a roll man in pick and roll? And the other one is post-defense percentile. How good were you post-defense? I've got 4 guys on this list. One of them is Walker Kessler. Doesn't play for the Hornets, but a rookie big man who is considered the gold standard rookie big man from last season. And then there's the Cockroach, and then there's Big Dick Nick. Yes, have I used some numbers that make Mark Williams look favorable? Of course, that's what I'm going to do because I'm actually a pretty decent believer in him this season. But it is interesting to note here is that in the very top right corner here, you've got Mark Williams as being in the highest percentile for post defense out of those players. And also in the highest percentile for roll man possessions. And why is roll man possessions important? Well, LaMelo Ball is the point guard. And he was already putting up these roll man possessions when LaMelo played like 30 games. How much pick and roll is LaMelo going to use with an absolute giant man who can just slam it down with really high efficiency? The fact that he rolls, this has got nothing to do with finishing on the pick and roll, but how often he is willing to roll, I think that can actually go higher next season, his roll man percentage, which is very useful for a little bit of a usage tick up and some efficiency, but also being able to defend the post and block some shots. I think that those two things, post defense, pick and roll man stuff, should really enamor him with Clifford as that starter. This is not a foolproof method at all. I almost said method then, like I'm speaking at Broady Station. Shout out to those of you who get that reference. But a few little things there that I thought were well, relatively interesting, I think. Let's look at fantasy sleepers. I am going to go to Mark Williams because I do think that there is quite a bit of value here in him. Initially, he was ranked 300th on Yahoo, which of course made no sense. They've adapted it to 95. His ADP is still 129. Every week we do Market Watch Monday or Monday Movers, whatever I'm calling the show. I can't remember. Monday Movers. That ADP is going to come in every week because people will start to follow the rank. I think that even in a points league, less so, but even in a points league, old Mark at 95 is really good value. And in a category league, it smashes. His ADP on Fantrax is 91. Value. His rank on ESPN for categories is 137. Come on. His rank for points leagues on ESPN is 182.
Oh, hi, Mark.
And I'm sorry, what? Where did he rank in points leagues last season on ESPN? 167. Yeah, seems pretty likely he'll be 15 spots worse. His ADP is at 140. You don't have to get Mark Williams. There's no requirement that he's a must-draft player or anything along those lines. Your Durant, well, that's a bit of a spoiler for later. My Durant metric drops him a little bit from a regular -1 or from a standard category league ranking where he might look 60th or 50th or 40th, depending if you're including turnovers. Again, don't do anything like that. Don't take him there. But 90s, 100s, 180s, come on. I'm also including LaMelo Ball here. Durant loves him as a metric. It's got him 4th. My other rankings don't quite have him that high, but they definitely have him as a first-round guy. On Yahoo, he's been pushed up to number 8 in their rankings. That's okay. That doesn't make him a sleeper. It is just totally okay there. His ADP is 12. I would take him ahead of 12. On Fantrax, his ADP is 12. I love it. He's ranked in 9 category leagues on ESPN at 16. Yeah, easily I'll take that. And his ADP on ESPN is 17. Now, he's ranked at 9 on ESPN points leagues, and I'm not really in on that. In fact, I think he's worse than that in a points league. Plus, tying in some of the schedule concerns, I definitely wouldn't do that there. And that's why, him ranked at 8 on Yahoo is okay. I don't mind it. He's probably more of a 9-10 player to me. But I think there is value in LaMelo. And again, Durant loves him. It's got him at 4. I'll say this now because I'm not going to save it for later. I'm not worried about his injury. I'm not worried about the fact that he sprained his ankle and then re-sprained his ankle standing on a fan and then fractured his ankle. I'm not worried about any of it. I'm not worried about Lonzo Ball's knee. I'm not worried about any of that stuff. I'd be more worried about the wrist that he injured as a rookie that he always seems to be flexing. Is that going to cause a problem? People will tell you, there is no way, Josh, no way that you can take LaMelo Ball in the first round. He played 75 games in 21-22. This will be the same people that tell you, well, you got to draft Vooch. He played 82, mate. He's just unbelievable. Derek White played 82 games, mate. How can you not draft him? 82. Like, LaMelo played 75 the year before. We would have been pepper grinding him for playing so many games. But it doesn't mean anything. He could play him, he might not. I've got no problem with drafting LaMelo Ball. None. Just depending on the spot that you get him at. And that is the question that we have for the entry into the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl, if I can find what I'm talking about. The question is going to be, LaMelo Ball last season played 36 games. How many threes per game did he average to 1 decimal point? The answer that I want from you is 4. On that entry form, just put 4. He hit 4 threes per game. That's all the answer that I want from you. 4 threes per game for LaMelo Ball. Don't write 4 threes per game. Don't write 4.0. Just write 4. Number 4. Straight into that entry on the form to get that answer right. Just 4. That's it. Nothing else. 4. Number 4. Hit the keyboard once to get your answer in. Fantasy busts. I think the number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller, shouldn't have been the number 2 overall pick, but I think the number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller, is a fantasy bust in certain situations. I had him number 6 on my draft board. I don't love him as a player. I do think he can become a serviceable to good starter in the mold of a Chris Middleton. I think Scoot Henderson can become an absolute superstar. I think Amen Thompson can become an absolute superstar. I think Asar Thompson can become a sub-superstar. I think Taylor Hendricks can become a multiple all-star, time all-star. I don't know that Brandon Miller is quite on the level of those guys. I could get an argument for him to go 4. I get that, right? No problem. There are certain ranks and situations here with Miller which are crazy to me. Now, he's ranked 211th on Yahoo. Absolutely, totally on board with that. I think that's reasonable. And I also, honestly, I don't have any problem. You know my theory. Hit round 11, do whatever you want. Go for upside. Is Miller upside? I don't actually think he is. But you might. You might go, well, he could be really good. It's very unlikely as a rookie, but do whatever you want in round 11. And at 211, that actually doesn't make him a bust at all. His ADP is at 126. I don't think there's any shot that he hits that, honestly. And I think that even if you saw, well, maybe they shut blokes down and they're terrible, I don't think they're going to be that bad. But if they shut blokes down and then he's rolling at a top 100 number in fantasy playoffs, then that's okay. But that means you have to hold him all year to get there. So I don't love that. But then ESPN's got him ranked at 103 for category leagues, 97 for points leagues. Bruh, what are you doing? And he's got an ADP of 110. Under no circumstance am I looking at him as a round 8 or round 9 draftable player. Silly. Do you even know that he's going to start? I don't. In fact, I don't think there's any chance that he starts. Maybe he does the first 10 games where Bridges is out. And that brings us to this, because Miles Bridges is suspended the first 10 games. The most limp-wristed, lettucey type slap on the wrist you could possibly get. Oh, you've already served 20 games. Cool. When you were signed to no team. There were the underhanded dealings between the NBA, the PA, the Hornets with this makes me pretty sick, to be honest. Oh, if you don't agree to sign this season, we'll give you a 20-game suspension that is counted, and then you only have to sit out. Just suspend him properly and let shit fall where it needs to. It's disgusting, really. But he's out the first 10 games. That means he can max 72 games. Will he be rusty, having not played for a year plus? Probably a little bit. The other questionable thing there is him signing the qualifying offer means that they couldn't come to any sort of agreement on a long-term deal, and he took that real quick. He probably said, I want $100 million, 4 years, and they went, yeah, nah. And no other team was willing to invest in shit bloke you, and if any team is going to invest in shit blokes, it's going to be the Hornets. So he took it. Did they want 1 year to see how the optics look and then re-sign him? But I would guess that level of quick snap, accept qualifying offer from Bridges would mean that the likelihood of him returning to this team is relatively low. So he was clearly their second best player before the suspension. He was clearly was. But are they not going to invest in him now? Look, if you can get past moralizing about how shit he is and have him on your fantasy team, where he goes in drafts at the moment is really, really strong value. I think there's a great amount of value in Miles Bridges, who's ranked at 81 with an ADP of 93. This is a guy that was top 30 for a big stretch of that season 2 years ago. He faded, and I think top 50 is probably more realistic, but that's still good value. If you and this is a personal decision, you might be like, I just don't want that guy on my team, and I get it. If that's what you want to do, I get it. But others will be like, it's just numbers, man. And I get that too. He's out 10 games. That's going to complicate the rotation when he returns. The other injuries quickly on those, LaMelo Ball's ankle, already said I don't care. Cody Martin played 2 minutes last year. Not quite, but he played 2 games with a knee problem that was never fully explained. And that's just another name to add into the rotation mix, because if there's one thing I know is Steve Clifford will like Cody Martin, or does like Cody Martin, because he goes out there and does shit that wins games. He defends well, he shoots well, he moves the ball, but he's not going to be a fantasy guy. But him getting those 22, 23 minutes behind Rozier, behind Hayward, behind Miller, in front of Miller, is going to complicate a lot of stuff. And then Williams' his thumb, he had that surgery, he'd be fine, he's ready to go. But a lot of injury stuff there for sure. As for Bridges, back to him, I think if you're looking round 9 for him is reasonable and huge return on investment possibility there. Obviously, Martin's just a deeper league guy, and Mark Williams I've already talked about. Who could they trade? A couple of options. One of them is Gordon Hayward, but I think the guy that's in most demand would be someone like Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier is definitely not a point guard, but he's probably going to play as the backup point guard here. And teams shouldn't acquire him to be a primary point guard, but a team like the Bucks, who have Grayson Allen and Malik Beasley at the 2, Rozier's an upgrade on those guys. Now, he did struggle when he was forced into a larger role last season with efficiency, so I would expect usage and assist rates from last season to go down from Rozier, but maybe efficiency goes up. But I still think that if they were to make a move, he would be the most likely to be traded. But the problem is if they do trade him away, they just don't have any guards. It's Ball, and then like Cody Martin is sort of a guard. Brandon Miller and Gordon Hayward are not. I do not believe Brandon Miller is a guard at all. They drafted Nick Smith, but I don't actually believe in him, and I don't think he's nowhere near ready for a rotation role now. They've got Frank Ntilikina, so good luck to that. And they just don't have any guard depth at all. James Bouknight, I haven't even talked about him because he's bad and a shit bloke. Like, where does he fit in the road? Like, they got no guards. They got LaMelo Ball, and if they trade Rozier, they need more guards back. So maybe that would be Beasley or Allen. Maybe one of those guys. Maybe it is Beauchamp that comes back, who's probably better than all those other guys. But Rozier, I would say, along with Hayward, are probably the 2 bigger risks to be traded away. Contract year guys, 3 unrestricted free agents on this roster: Miles Bridges, Gordon Hayward, and Frank Ntilikina. I've already talked about the Bridges scenario. Hayward, to me, is not really a 12-team league player. Now, if you wanted to take Gordon Hayward in the last round or the second last round of a standard league draft, I don't really have a problem with it. Just with Bridges, Washington, Miller, all there, I don't think that they're going to run to give him 34 a night. He struggled a lot last season, but he's also a guy that can still be really good. So if he gets into a position where they're starting him, and they could, maybe they do start Gordon Hayward because he moves the ball. Theoretically, he can still shoot. There is value in him, and I think that he'll be a guy, even if he's not drafted, that you do want to get off the wire and just see what happens. He's also unrestricted, though. Where does he go after this season, or is he part of a trade that happens? Ntilikina is also unrestricted, signed a 1-year deal to be the Dennis Smith Jr. replacement. He's not as good as Dennis Smith. His offensive game is horrendous. And even defensively, I'm not sure he's quite as good as Dennis Smith, who honestly is a very, very good point guard. They could also bring back someone like Teo Maledon, but for some reason he's just sitting out there and nothing's happening. What are some rotation risks? I've espoused the positive attributes of Mark Williams all show, but what if they play PJ Washington some small ball? They didn't last season at all. It was Plumlee, it was Williams, it was Richards, and it was Kai Jones. Washington really didn't play center at all. He's 6'8". He can play a little bit of it. He can shoot sometimes. In fact, there was one point that he was getting this sound drop.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
Because of the wild swings and efficiency. He's a pretty good defender. He's an okay ball mover. I think he's actually a pretty good player. But if they decide to lean into him at small ball so that we can get Bridges, Hayward, Miller onto the court more, well, that will impact Mark Williams somewhat. It means that Mark probably doesn't get 30 a night, might get 26, and then it impacts Big Dick Nick, who honestly is just a backup. Like, I don't think we need to worry about, they'll just take the minutes away from Williams so they can keep giving Richards minutes. I don't think that'll happen. But Washington, it would impact Washington's projection if he plays small ball 5, because he actually does put up better fantasy numbers when he plays at center, and there's more opportunity for minutes that way. They could also de-emphasize Bridges. Like, okay, well, you're back. You got this thing, but you're not going to be here next season. We've got Hayward. We've got Washington, who we just re-signed. We've got Miller. Is Miller and Washington our 3-4 of the future, and we don't actually care for you, Miles? Maybe. And then he plays 25 off the bench. He's not usable, and Miller and Washington's value skyrockets. Again, I don't think that's the case, but it's possible. And the other thing is, what if Miller just gets fully Clifforded? Like, plays for Greensboro. That probably won't happen, but sticks at 20 minutes a night. Williams played 19 minutes a night. He wasn't the number 2 overall pick. But Steve Clifford has coached Cody Zeller, who played like 18 minutes as a rookie. Frank Kaminsky, who played 20-something as a rookie. Mo Bamba, who played like 19 as a rookie. And it's not like there was just, we've got nobody else to play. So it's not like Miller's like, well, he has to play 34 a night because Hayward's there, Bridges is there, Washington is there, even Cody Martin is there. He could absolutely get Clifforded and really change things up in that rotation quite a bit. No one really stood out as a per-minute monster on this team. No one I go, wow, if only they got an opportunity, they'll blow up. No one really stood out like that. Let's look at their depth chart. Guards, wings, forwards, bigs. I think they start 2 guards, Ball and Rozier. Rozier's not a wing, he's a guard. Again, I like LaMelo as a first-round guy. I like Rozier. He's got a little bit of value now that he's pushing into the 70s and 80s in drafts. Where is Tez's, 84? I don't think we should be considering Terry Rozier as a top 50 sort of a player where some ranking systems may have had him in the past. But in that round 7, round 8, round 9 zone, totally okay. And their guard depth is Ntilikina, it's Nick Smith, it's Jim Bouknight and Tamari Bailey. Bouknight's terrible. Bailey's an interesting prospect, but he's on a 2-way. Smith, I think, is going to be very bad and play most of the time for Greensboro and has to really work forward. And Ntilikina will just be like giving what Clifford wants, and that's defense. I don't think they're starting any true wings. And again, for me, a wing is a guy who's like a 2-3 combo and doesn't really play any 1 or any 4 or doesn't exclusively play 4. I guess you could call Bridges or Hayward or even Miller wings, but I'd like to call them forwards more. Their wings are really Cody Martin and Bryce McGowan's. McGowan's had some moments last season towards the end, but I don't think we care too much there. That's when Sfima Hailuk was running things. And Cody Martin barely played. He will get 19, 20 minutes a night, I would guess, most nights. In terms of the forward depth, I don't know who they're going to start. I think opening night, Gordon Hayward probably gets the nod as a forward. And I think you've got Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, and then the god of hammers, JT Thor.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
The forwards, again, is a small forward, power forward sort of a player to me, which is where Hayward would spend his time. Bridges can play both those positions, and I think Miller can too. I don't think you want Miller playing a lot as a 2. I guess you could find some spots for it. Miller, Hayward, Bridges, Miller, Hayward, Washington, Miller, Bridges, Washington, next to Ball. I could sort of see that. I do worry about how it looks defensively, and if there's one thing I know, is that Steve Clifford will also pay attention to how that looks defensively. So even though I've got Bridges and Miller in this bench group, Bridges will still, I think, play decently, and he could very easily start when he's back from suspension ahead of Hayward. And then for the bigs to me are either centers or power forward centers only. So I think that initially they'll start PJ Washington and Mark Williams. That could be Bridges starting over Washington for sure, but I do think Washington probably now would be favourite to start there. And then backup bigs, it's Nick Richards and Kai Jones. I don't think Kai's going to play a lot. Kai did change his game a lot last season. He is a good shot blocker, pretty good rebounder, but he'd been playing like a perimeter guy, trying to work on his threes, and last season they just went, absolutely not. You are a center. You take no threes unless you're at the basket. His field goal percentage went up. His three-point attempt rate went down. He blocked more shots. He looked better, but I don't really look with Williams and Richards there. He's clearly behind those guys. You don't want him playing as a 4, I don't think. So he backs up these guys, and I just don't think we're really going to see much of Kai Jones. I would have no real faith in him long term. Quick look at Durant and Bazemore. Durant is really in favour of LaMelo Ball this season, so that's something to watch. Again, it has him 4th per game. It actually downgrades Mark Williams because of the blocks and to a little lesser extent the field goal issue. And it actually upgrades Brandon Miller. That's something to watch. It doesn't upgrade him to be a must-draft player or a top 100 guy, nothing like that for this season, but it does upgrade him. For Bazemore, my dynasty metric, it's got LaMelo as a top 5 player. That shouldn't be controversial. Some people might think it is. It shouldn't. It's got Mark Williams top 40. It's got Brandon Miller top 80. Not that big on Miller. And I think he can probably top out as a top 30 guy eventually, but I wouldn't want to take him anywhere near that. And then Gordon Hayward is outside the top 320. No surprise there. And Nick Smith doesn't like him at all. Again, it is hard when you're looking at rookies who are barely going to play. But there's so many of these guys just never hit. And I think Smith might be one of those. And that'll do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Please thumb it up and please leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.
What the hell?